So I'll just give a brief introduction. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining today. I hope everyone's healthy and safe. I'm Sanjana Shettigar, the Public Relations at Polis, and I would like to welcome all of you for today's session of thesis presentation on behalf of Polis. For those who have not attended this talk earlier, Graduation Thesis Presentation Series is an informal sharing space where alumni from urbanism and landscape architecture can share their research, thoughts, tips, and tricks on doing a good thesis. That's the main intention. And today we'll be doing our fourth episode where we have Yishan Yuan with us. Thank you for joining, Yishan.
Thank you.
She's an urbanism student from the Transitional Territories Studio. Her graduation project led her to her career at Royal Haskoning, DHV, which most of us, I guess, knows, where transformation of Den Helder is being put into practice. And what drives her from design studio to engineering consultancy company, as well as self-employment, is the fascination to incorporate problem-solving technologies, user-centric services into the design for a better living equality. For her thesis, her mentor, Franchel Humaya, really encouraged her for a multidisciplinary journey and shared the knowledge with her to really make this project great. Today, she would be presenting her graduation project titled At the End of the Netherlands, Nature-Based Adaptation for Shrinking Port Cities, Den Helder. It is part of the Delta Intervention North Sea Landscapes of Coexistence Studio at the Faculty of Urbanism. The graduation project mainly tackles the issue of shrinking port cities around the Wadden Sea. The future 2053 big flood is a push to the crossroads between breakdown and breakthrough. Foreseeing the natural hazards, Den Helder has been reinforcing its adaptability with nature-based solutions. Reciprocal collaboration between tidal ecosystem and port economy is credited her for the systematic transformation from port zone decaying neighborhoods to rural polders. Without further ado, I would like to invite Yuan to take over.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very nice introduction. And I'm very glad to be invited to share my thesis, but more importantly, I would like also to share some tips and maybe reflections for the graduation year. So my project is about the Den Helder, how we can use nature-based solutions to revive the shrinking port. And I graduated last year from the Delta Intervention Studio. My mentor is Franchel, and after the graduation, I joined Royal Haskoning, which is the engineering consultancy company. And actually, I joined from when I'm still doing the thesis because they're also doing a project in Den Helder. So I write them a letter, say, hey, can I join as an intern? And then luckily they say yes, because they are also applying the nature-based solutions to Den Helder. And after graduation, I continue as an urban designer in Royal Haskoning. For that year, my studio focused on the North Sea landscape of coexistence. That means how urbanization and the force of nature coexist together and how they interact. So the nature-based solutions, the concept is from the EU agenda. So it's about how we can cooperate ecosystem service into our urban development and how these two development, the ecology and economy, can actually benefit each other. For the background, it's for the background, we have the first like 3 months exploring the North Sea. So we have this excursion around the coastal area and see how the nature forces of North Sea carrying the urbanization of North Sea coast. So on one side, it's the North Sea is like the carrying force of the urbanization, but on the other side, because of the morphology of North Sea, it's also very easily to have storms. This is very well known in the history of the Netherlands, because Netherlands is a country that around the North Sea, and there's several very big flood in the history, like the 1953 flood. It's a very destroying the south part of the Netherlands. So the port cities is actually a very high risk investment, because on one side it is benefit from the sea, but on the other side it is also very stress. The stress is also coming from like the rising sea level and the storm. So I think the first challenge, if some of you are choosing the Delta Intervention Studio, it's about the first challenge will be how can you zoom, like search for a very large topic like the North Sea, and then how do you zoom into your project site. So I think the art is really about how you define your project scope. For the Delta Intervention Studio, we are very familiar with the 3x3 methodology. That is, we put 3 layers. This is the subsystem, the network, and urbanization layers. And then we identify 3 critical periods. So I choose the period based on the different types of logistics. And then by this, so it's a mapping methodology across space and time. From this framework, you can really see what's going on between the natural forces and how the urbanization is related to it. For me, I found interesting is the shrinking cities, because mostly we focus on how the North Sea have nourished the urbanization. But on the other side, is actually there's also many cities that become smaller or even decayed or disappeared due to the change of different logistic methods. So the port cities, there's many shrinking port cities around the North Sea, mostly because they depend so much on the maritime industry. And once the industry collapses, the city collapses the economy. So port cities around the North Sea, they have the high possibility of shrinking. This is especially obvious at the Wadden Sea area in the Netherlands, because for this area, there used to be many cities that depends on the maritime industry. But in the beginning of the 20th century, this area has been identified as the World Heritage. It means no maritime activities are actually allowed, and the whole area are naturally protected. And so that's toward the sea. And if we tour the land, it's also very far from the from like Amsterdam and Den Haag, this metropolitan area. So this area has been a little bit like abandoned. And on the other hand, it's also having the flood risk because of the dike and the rising sea level. Den Helder is the city that incurs the worst case. So they have the worst population growth and also losing a lot of employment. So this is why I choose the site as Den Helder. And Den Helder is at the northern end tip of the Netherlands. So on one side, this location has benefited Den Helder in the history because it is at the ending point, and that means it's closest to the sea and the land. But now, because the sea cannot be exploited and it is also very far from the metropolitan area, so the city is decaying. And that is why my project is called The End of Netherlands. It's not really cursing the Netherlands, but it's like, okay, this is how the Netherlands, the coastline ends right now. It's a huge green wall and it's like a dead end. But we see the challenge for Den Helder and also for many port cities is they will want to explore the sea, but actually the ecology and economy happens to be like in a struggle. So this dilemma has become a very interesting topic. And my research is about at this end situation. is there like a possibility if we use a nature-based solution to explore the new age? Because we know in the nature, there is no really like the ending point. There is always something beyond. So I'm trying to challenge if how we can make the end of the land and the sea into a more like a natural way of a new age. Because the age can be something more, and if how that depends on how we structure our landscape and infrastructure. So, and this idea concept is actually very like not new at all, because in the Netherlands we are very good at like building with nature concept. This is like dike in the dunes, or like we have this kind of project that's trying to make the dike into the landscape. It's sorry. Okay. Yeah. So my research question is about how can we make a collaboration between ecosystem service and economic based on nature-based solutions, and how this can be benefit back to the shrinking port cities. So this have the issue with the flood risk and how we can improve the livability in Denhelder. So more people will be back to the Denhelder, and how can we validate ecosystem service so people will be more aware of the nature value. And I think why I choose the Delta Intervention Studio is I really like how they encourage you to like make a integrated research. So it's not only about urban design, but it's also like I'm interested in water management and also risk management. We have so many lectures that we invite some like water experts or like risk experts to teach us the concept of how to make integrated coastal zone management. And this DPSIR framework is something like a framework that can help you to integrate this different scope. So for urban data intervention studio, we highlight how we can make a smooth transit from the macro scale to the micro scale. That is from the Wadden Sea, but also zoom down to the Denhelder cities. And on the other side is also incorporate with the nature and the economy. So what I highlight is the rising sea level and also the economy shift. And like I said before, like we have this kind of building with nature in Netherlands. So this is kind of a technology, like we try to cooperate with the nature. But I remember there is a seminar we invite some, I think it's from England, and when Hammer was posting this concept saying, okay, we are very good at how the Dutch can build with the nature, and how we make like the sand engine, and how we manage our coastline with the nature. And there is one speaker, he stand up and challenge a bit like saying, okay, so you're saying you want to build with the nature, but it is very well known, like in the Netherlands, there's actually no really nature. It's all about the man-made nature. So what's the nature you really refer to? Is it again the man-made nature or the natural nature? And how can you like be so confident about how you can manage this nature? And I think that's the point I really reflect. Okay, so we have been saying we want to urbanize, but in a way that is more close to the landscape and the nature. But how can we make, like saying, okay, this is the nature we define, but how can we manage it, and how can we make sure what we intervene now can be success in the future? So there's a book saying about design for flooding, and there's a very interesting concept saying maybe a flood is like a disturbance that the city has been waiting for, because there is at some point there is always need a breakdown and a breakthrough for the cities. This also reflects to the hauling cycle. So for this cycle, this cycle is called the adaptive cycle, and it has 4 stages. It's about the exploitation, conserve, release, and reorganize. So this is how we can narrative the natural way of evolution. And if we want to like build our cities based to the nature, maybe we also have to like align with this evolution. That means we have this conserve, relief, reorganization, but also the stage that is to be more like conserve and slow down the development, like a shrinking situation. So shrinking is actually can be described as part of the nature evolution, and maybe we have to accept it and to wait to conserve to prepare for the next chaos. So my project, when I talked to my mentor about this concept, I'm a little bit worried because she's Dutch, and I think, okay, maybe she's also very like proud of how the Dutch people manage the coastline with the building with nature concept. But when I'm saying to her, I think the Dutch maybe fail in like near futures, because there is, how can you be so confident like the dike, the coastline you build is going to survive? And actually she likes the idea, and she introduced me to the approach called design fiction. So this approach is about you manipulate a future scenario, and then from this future scenario you have some you have some interviews with the local residents and collect their imaginations to build a scenario for the future, and then you backcast back to the current situation. So you can compare, okay, so what's the preferable scenario and what's the business as usual scenario, and how can we bridge these two scenarios into the development? So for me, I manipulate this future scenario based on a flood. I'm saying, okay, because after the 100 years after, in 2053, there will be a big flood, and that will destroy the Den Helder. And so this kind is like an experiment, but it's also based on the GI, the like hydraulic performance. And so it's very likely to happen in some way, but also more like to be a little bit like a drama. And I present this scenario to the local residents and ask to have some workshop with them. So I also have like a questionnaire for them saying, okay, so can you imagine like, okay, after 50 years, there's a big storm and destroy Den Helder. Why would you still stay living in Den Helder? And that makes some very interesting stories from them. So I can start my project from this page. This is about the fiction about 2053, the end of New Zealand because of a big storm. So at 2053, there is a storm, and then at Den Helder, the storm has been caused a very big flood to the city and the port. So the port is actually destroyed. But after the flood, there is a new age because the Den Helder cannot depend on their port industry anymore. So people over there, they try to find the new way of economy. And so I have some like interviews from the residents over there. They give me some very interesting stories. Like they say, okay, if it is really flooded, I think I will be all right because I have a ship. Like every people here, they have ships, so maybe we will be all right. And for some people, they say, oh, okay, even if it is flooded, I will still stay here because Den Helder has this kind of very unique landscape that they have many canals and very close to the sea. So they really like this living quality. And for some people, they say, okay, although I have a business over here, but I think the business will be all right because there's also a lot of polders. I would just say, okay, let the polders flood it, and maybe the flood will be fine because the polder is not really in use anyway. So I further interpret these stories into the landscape. So on the left is the current situation, on the right is like a scenario based on the local imagination. So like this one is a business park in the future saying, okay, the polders are flooded, but the area can still survive. And there's some case study saying how can this be happen. And also for the residential area, because people refer to the close relation with the sea and the port. So maybe if they want to stay here, they still want these kind of qualities in their living neighborhoods. So this is how the future neighborhoods can be more living with the flood. Okay, so after this exploration, we have to back to the back to the current situation. It's the Helder is still shrinking. So there is no such a big flood now. It might happen in the future, but what is going on is a pressure that the Helder's economy is dying and everything, the city is shrinking. So this experiment has, I collect some lessons from this flood experiment because like the local perception of nature values. What are the values from the nature that the residents are very like about, and why these qualities have become attractive to them, and why this can make them want to stay in the Den Helder. On the other hand, there is also the shrinking economy, and for shrinking cities in the Netherlands, there is three strategies that is often being used. That is oppose, guide, and utilize. But these strategies are only focusing on the economy. And what my research is claiming is shrinking is actually not only an economy issue, but also an environmental issue. So it shouldn't be addressed only by the economy, but it should always refer also to the ecology. So I make principles for this research. I'm saying, okay, although we have this utilize, guide, and oppose, but how can we incorporate the nature into these three strategies? So I have adapted three strategies with the nature, saying every time like these three strategies, when are we going to apply these strategies? Should be based on the risk. So you first analyze the risk and see what's the risk from the environment and what's the risk from the social economy, and then you make then we indicate what's the phase you should be focusing on, whether it is utilize, guide, or oppose. And then if we put these principles into the spatial design, it's about, I also make a sequence. So these three concepts has helped me to frame the phasing. So it's always about conserve, release, reorganize, and then to the transformation. This is referred to the previous Hollings adaptive cycle. So when it really comes to like, okay, so what can I design based on this principle? I first recognize that the canal has been playing a very critical element in Den Helder, because canals on one side it's connecting the economy, and on the other side is connecting the tidal. So if I can make a nice intervention along this canal area, then I can boost both the economy and also the ecology. So this canal has become the point of integrated these two kind of development. So from the section, I trying to merge these two development into one section, into the canal section, saying how we can make this the land use along these canals more productive and more in a natural way. So there is this corridor is about this, to control the flood, to nourish the nature, connect the tidal to the city. And on the other side, this canal is also about reviving the economy, because these canals can be the shipping routes, logistic routes for agriculture, port industry, but also for the tourism. And then this will reflect to the polders beside these canals. So most of these polders are not really in use already because they are the economy there is not very well. So I'm saying maybe we can utilize this economy recession and reuse these polders. So these polders have been transformed along the canal and making into a multifunction, not only for the agriculture, but also for water management. So these polders can be storing the flood, but also when to also make use of the new economy. And this also follows the utilize, guide, and oppose the three phases. So I try to revive these polders, make it more for the flood, but also for the new automatic agriculture. So this proposal is more in a technical way how the civil engineering can actually also benefit from the nature-based solutions and make use of the ecosystem and to boost the economy. And what these polders will impact on the industry area and also the residential area. I will first explain how these polders impact the industry. Because the industry right now is also recessing and the land use, many kind of land use is shrinking. So I'm saying, okay, if we put this kind of new polder system into this industry zone, what can be happens over there? So it can boost the new kinds of maritime industry, but also the tourism. And then it follows also the three stage, the utilize, guide, and oppose, to make a new, to prepare this industry area for 2053. And for the residential area, it's more difficult because people living there and people are very, like people is always, on one side, they are not aware of the climate change, but there is a risk. And so in current Den Hader, the housing over there, the housing situation is not very well because most of the housing are very old and it's decaying. But people are not going to renew their houses and they are not very into the transformation of Den Hader anymore because they are saying, I'll just move away. Why should I invest so much in this shrinking city? So it's a little bit challenging to find the cost-effective way for them. But if we don't make a transformation, then the risk over there, because of the residency level and the economy, the risk is also is growing. So what I propose is insurance proposal. So this proposal is about how you can lend your backyard to the municipality, because most of the backyard is not in use anymore. And so why not just lend this backyard to the municipality and then make a more integrated blue corridor for this residential area. And so this is kind of a scheme that how the municipality can work together with the residents. And then with this new kind of backyard, it can be used for water detention. So this backyard intervention can help with flood management. And so this kind of have different kind of neighborhood morphology. And for different kind of neighborhood, I propose different kind of the backyard system for them. And then we have to identify, okay, so we have these three types of pattern, but where are we going to impose it into the cities? This is based on the risk. So from this risk map, you can see the different risk degree in this neighborhood, and you can recognize where should I put this different kind of strategy. This also refers to the housing situation, and also I'm also trying to validate the ecosystem service to the residents, because I found if it's a little bit hard to explain, like, okay, you should do nature way. It's for many residents, they only care about how much it's going to cost me and how can I benefit from it. So it's also important to validate the ecosystem service to them, saying by this step-by-step transformation of your neighborhood, how can you really benefit from the value of the nature, and how can you reduce the risk from a flood? So this comes to the end of my research project. This research is about how from the present situation and we make a design fiction for the future. And then we can, based on this future scenario, we can make adjustments from now. So it's like a loop. You can always make adjustment. And then this project also based very much on the current situation of Deinhelder, because from Rojas Conning, they have run this simulation of the Deinhelder and see, okay, this is the risk and hydrology of Deinhelder. And how can we benefit from this hydrology? And but also if we expand, because actually the Deinhelder municipalities are trying to expand the port. Although there is a debate saying, okay, if you expand the port, it's going to interfere with the nature, and the nature should be protected. But what we propose is a new way of expanding our port. So this port expansion can actually benefit the tidal area, because it can help to reduce, slow down the wave, and then to nourish the polders. So, and this is a simulation saying after this transformation, what can be happen if, okay, in 2053, there is really a flood, and what might happen if we have the business as usual, or if we have been transforming our cities from now. So these different kind of scenarios becomes like very persuasive to the, also for the residents. And so the reflection, I go back to the structure of this research. It's about how this pressure from the ecology and economy impact on the city together. And how can we respond by making a future scenario, and how proceed from current situation to the future. And also important is how can we validate the ecosystem service to the residents. So this project is trying to highlight the dilemma of Port City. On one side, the sea is always a very good resource for urbanization. But on the other side, how can we cooperate with ecological conserving? And how can we benefit our cities from this conservation of nature? And on the other hand, how the nature can also benefit from our new way of urban economy. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chuan. Yeah, for your insights, and it was quite interesting, the whole project and the approach of 2053 flooding situation in a context like Netherlands, which they always say that it's not possible, but the whole idea of how to deal with shrinking cities, I think it's pretty interesting. So I would like to now move on to the second part of our after the presentation for the questions. So do we have questions from our audience for the speaker? Because we have around 27 participants today. Okay. So I would like to ask a question, since nobody's mentioning anything. I wanted to know your process, and like how you started initially, and what were the challenges throughout this understanding, and also was it because this context is of Netherlands, and the social aspect, how did you go about dealing with that, since you've been here now, like let's say for the education coming from a different.
So I think for certain points, because I also want to engage the residents, but that is very difficult because, of course, the language is a problem. But so that's also why I trying to use this kind of more like a storytelling way to show to them, and also like I also show them like the image and what's the possibilities if it becomes flooded in the future. So it's more, I cannot speak Dutch to them, but I can show them like the possibilities and also use some stories because people like stories. So I think story is something very powerful, and stories can always you can always reflect something from the stories.
True.
And yeah, but also because afterwards, after graduating this project, the transformation of Dan Helder efforts carry on to the company Royal Scanning, and it's also very a bit difficult because for them it's also a very Dutch company, and so at first they're also trying to merge the concept of nature-based solutions, but even for them, it's very difficult to persuade the residents to make the residents want to involve, because people really people doesn't easily accept this idea of being more in a natural way. They focus more on the part. So every time if there is a decision making process, the part always have the top priority. So that's something not very also very challenging. But I think that's also the interesting part because there is also so many negotiations. So it's always like, okay, how can we manage the port economy, but also the protection of the tidal area?
Yeah.
And I think that's something very interesting in the Netherlands because the Netherlands, they regard the nature very seriously. So they, I know maybe like in my country, the economy will always be the top priority. But in the Netherlands, there's also very strong favor for the nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for your answer. Yeah. I think that was really helpful.
Yeah. Could I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Martha.
Yeah, first of all, very nice, very interesting. I found it very nice, this kind of approach that you make like a scenario and then you ask people to react on this. I have a question from the very beginning from your presentation. Is this 3x3?
Yeah.
So you had like the 3 layers, but I mean, I didn't really get this concept. Maybe it's something that I didn't get. It was like in the very first slides of the presentation.
Yeah. So that's a framework that I think very important for the Delta Intervention Studio. They kind of innovate this framework. So in that, because although I'm from urban design, but in Delta Intervention Studio, they very favor of the concept on landscape. So for landscapes, they separate the urban system into 3 layers. That is the like nature layers, the network layer, and the how people interact with the urbanization. So these 3 layers, when you map together, then you can see there are like some kind of interaction between them. And then on the other hand, we have these 3 time period. This period you can define yourself, like saying what make you interesting. Like for me, I'm interested in different logistic technology. So this is why I identify these 3 edge, focusing on the 3 methods of logistic technology. So this framework, I think, is trying to help you define your project scope. And you can see what's more interesting for you and what's the scale you want to focus on. Like for me, I scale from this North Sea, but then I zoom down to the Den Helder. So it's really about how this framework can help you organize these different nature, like a dilemma between nature and human activities.
Nice, interesting. Yeah, thanks for the answer.
Yeah. So I received a question from a fellow classmate that they tried to find this report on the repository, but they couldn't find it. So is there any other way of accessing your?
Oh yeah, because I changed the name when I uploading the represent in the system, because the name is not very nice. If I upload it into a Dutch system, saying at the end of the New Zealand, so in a system, I think it's a code. I think it's easier if you type in the nature-based adaptation for Den Helder.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions? I guess everyone's very busy, even with the submissions.
I know, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, yeah. So if we have no further questions, then we would like to end the session for today. Yeah. So thank you, Ishan, for presenting your really good thesis. And it really gave us nice tips and suggestions to how to look at the problems and how to proceed ahead. If there are any further questions, would it be okay if anybody can contact you personally?
Sure. So if there's any question about the Delta Intervention Studio or about like how is it like working in an engineering company, you can always send me the question to my email.
Yeah. Yeah. Could you share? You can maybe share it to Polis, and we could upload the email, the correspondence email on our video also.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Much. So yeah, thank you for all the participants today that we had with us, and thank you for the speaker. So we'll be closing the session now, and I look forward for everybody to come tomorrow for our Polis Tuesday session, which is another informal sharing session we'll be having. Yeah. So yeah, good luck working, everybody.
Yeah,
And
thank
see
you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.